Hi, I'm Tom Hunt, and you're watching 7 Minutes of Wisdom. Hello, and today we are talking about the difference between being an employee and being an entrepreneur. And the reason I think myself, Tom Hunt, is actually able to comment on this topic is because I've made this transition. I've spent 3 years being an employee. I've almost spent 3 years being an entrepreneur. And what we're going to do in the next 6.5 minutes now is explain the difference between these two, the different mindsets that you would need to adopt, but also how you would make the transition between the two if you are interested in doing so. Because I don't believe that everybody should be an entrepreneur or everybody should be an employee. So if you feel like you would like to make that transition, by the end you should have a good idea of the differences and also a roadmap for doing so. So let's get started. An employee takes on less risk, so more security, but then also has less opportunity for reward. So traditionally, an employee would have a salary that they are paid for every month, and that salary is near enough guaranteed. Yes, the company could go out of business and they could lose their job, but they have a contract and they have a certain amount of notice that they should be given. And if they are sort of made redundant, then they get an extra lump sum. Okay, so to reiterate, less risk, more security, less upside. Then if we look at the other end of the spectrum, we have the entrepreneur who has maximum risk, less security, but also maximum upside. So there is no assurance, there's no governing body who's there looking after the entrepreneur, who is going to guarantee that they'll have their salary or guarantee this lump sum if they get made redundant. So these are the differences between the two. But before we move on to my personal journey and then the roadmap for doing so, the one thing I'd like to point out, the reason that I actually wanted to become an entrepreneur is because when you think about how I always take it back to this, but how we've evolved, we spent a long time evolving in tribes prior to the corporation came about, and these laws to protect people came into being. And therefore, our bodies, we don't really know really what these laws are or how they help us. And therefore, we enter into this agreement with corporations and these laws protecting us from things that maybe don't, like these risks are not actually that great. Our bodies just think they are, and these fake laws are protecting us. So when I sort of learned about this evolutionary progression, I thought all these things I'm scared about, like the high risk on the entrepreneur side while I was being an employee, the worst that can happen is not actually that bad. So yes, there's a high risk, but the impact of the bad thing happening is not actually that bad. Okay, yes, I just have to go and live with my parents again, which I actually did. So now I'm going to give a very quick overview of my sort of transition from employee to entrepreneur, and then I'm also going to explain about how I believe you can make that transition if you'd like to. So I studied chemistry and then graduated, and then purely because my brother and my mum and the rest of my sort of social circle at university were going to work in the bank or in a consulting company, I said, okay, yes, I should probably go and work in a consulting company. Also because I wanted to get like the big paycheck, right? So I joined one consulting company. From month 2, I didn't enjoy it. After a year and a half, it's pretty slow. I then thought if I went to the next consulting company and then that paid more and gave more exciting work, then I would also like have a better life. But again, in month 2 of that job, I realized that something was wrong and I didn't actually enjoy this. I think it was because the work that I was doing, I really just didn't care. I found it very hard to be engaged and to really enjoy the moment doing that work when I felt like there was no point in doing it. I was just making these sort of rich people in corporations a little bit richer. So I decided to embark upon this journey in the transition from being an employee to an entrepreneur. And what did that involve? It basically involved taking the stepstone of being self-employed. And this is crucial for anybody looking to make the transition. We're getting into the actionable part of the 7 minutes now, is that in order to make the journey from an employee, there's this step in the middle, which is I believe, very, very hard to skip. It's called being self-employed. You can then move on to being an entrepreneur and then an investor. If you have read Rich Dad Poor Dad or The Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki, this developmental model really comes from him. So if we quickly understand the difference between these 4 stages, or just the first 3, we won't talk about investor for now, but the employee works within a system. The self-employed person is the system, and the entrepreneur works above the system. So what I did when I was working within the Accenture system, that was the corporation I was working for, I decided to start my own small outsourcing company where I was very involved. I was selling to the clients. I was working with the people in the Philippines, and I was doing everything. So I was very much self-employed. Like every transaction, all of the value creation included me. So I was basically with the system with some help of the people in the Philippines. I had to do this because it taught me very, very important lessons about business and how to become an entrepreneur. And ultimately, I wouldn't have been able to make the step to being the entrepreneur that I am now without the self-employed level. So when I decided that I basically built myself another job and I was self-employed, I thought, okay, how can I sort of build a system that I could rise above and actually become an entrepreneur? So I built a marketplace, an online marketplace that would connect these 2 groups of people called Virtual Valley, that I could then sit above, and then the value creation and delivery would happen below me, and it would still happen without my direct input, my time, so I could work on the system. And that really is the true definition of the entrepreneur. I've then managed to go and sell that system. And here's the upside of being the entrepreneur. You can actually take the system that you've built and sell it. So you ultimately get paid twice, right? You get paid by the system, and you get paid as you sell the system. This is how anybody has ever got rich, right? By earning cash, producing assets. But that's another story. I've now moved on to building another different technology system in the same sort of niche, again, as the entrepreneur. So to summarize, I've tried to outline the difference between the employee and the entrepreneur. Also told a bit of my story and how I made that transition from the employee to the entrepreneur via the very, very important step that I would not advise anybody to miss out, which is actually becoming self-employed and being the system, usually yourself. And then ultimately, if we want, we can progress through to the investor. Right, I need everybody who's watching this to jump down and write your comments on your thoughts about this video, because I'm going to be in there and I'm going to be responding to every single one.